It's time to answer, should you open spotlight caches for Alioth in Marvel Snap? He's going to be the new card coming. We're going to look at whether you should open those spotlights for this card. Is he going to be a meta breaking card? Is he going to shake everything up right now? Spotlight caches are very rare. You've got to be smart when you spend them. Additionally, we're going to look at some day one decks for Alioth if you decide to get him in game. We'll also share what we think is the biggest keys to success with Alioth, as well as some final thoughts at the end. So let's dive in. All right, first we got to understand what the card is. It's a 6/5 on reveal. So Cosmo, be careful, or be careful of Cosmo. Destroy all enemy cards played here this turn, including unrevealed. This is an insanely powerful card. I've been saying it ever since we've seen it. It was originally 5 cost. They obviously changed it. That was very wise on their behalf. I think playing it late is more critical as far as making sure that it does not break the game. They've got some pretty cool variants of it. I don't know if I'm going to necessarily get these. I'd love to get them whenever they do pop off, but we do have some spotlights coming in the future for him as well, in case you do miss this one. And we've got a graphic for that. So anybody who wants to stay up to date with any of the spotlights, priorities, and where you might want to focus, think about liking and subscribing, because we will cover that and have it in the Discord, which is also linked in the description below. So at the face value of this card, I fully expect it to be a very strong card in game. The ability to destroy something before it's even revealed to essentially guarantee you a win in a particular lane, if 5 points is enough to get you the win, is absolutely gigantic. I think this is going to lean into a few different deck types. We're going to talk about some of those, but the truth is I could see Alioth being a lot of different places. It's just one of those cards that's really strong and could fit anywhere if you're winning one lane, and 5 points is enough to win you the last one. So this is a teaser of the spotlight graphic I've got. I'm working on the new ones that we've got data mined. You can see kind of where some things are at. So we've got them all over the place, but I still stick to this particular one as far as Alioth goes, being a save for. I think it's something that's worthwhile. Snowguard obviously got changed. I think with the Loki collector thing that's going on, Snowguard is even more valuable now. I think even without the stuff with Loki, that Snowguard has become a more reasonable card to play. A lot of people might not have Hitmonkey, even though he's fallen off a little bit with the whole bounce thing. I think in general, this is a great week to pull. I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to pull. If I get Alioth first pull, I'm going to have to seriously think about still pulling to potentially get Snowguard. If I don't get it on my second pull, I might stop at that point, but my ideal is Snowguard 1, Alioth 2, because that way I know I'm gonna keep pulling until I get Alioth. I will pull 4 this week until I get Alioth if I have to, and frankly, I'm due for a week like that. Frankly, I'm just expecting to pull all 4 until I get Alioth, and it's just going to be what it's going to be. So having said this, I've now said that I think he's clearly worthwhile to, I think, pull for. It's a Series 5 card. That means it's more expensive in the token shop. I typically rank those as more important to pull spotlights for, because I don't like pulling spotlights for Series 4 cards. I'd rather use tokens on that. I just think it's a better use of things in game. So now let's look at what decks we think can be used for Alioth on day one. First, let's shout out Marvel Snap Zone and their deck builder. I absolutely love this thing. I shout it out every time I do decks. I think it's great. It helps me theory craft what I want to do. Once I'm done, I save it. I use the code and just pop it in game, so it's easy to get that deck going right away. I don't have to stress about it. So Alioth Galactus, it's pretty simple. You get it down to 1 lane with Alioth, it's a hell of a lot easier. Now, Galactus is 6 cost, right? So how are you going to play 2 6-cost cards? And I don't have magic in here, by the way, if you haven't noticed. Well, I've leaned into the Electro Wave type gameplay, where you're going to get those higher cost cards earlier than you normally would. So reviewing this deck, I've got a little bit of a blur here. I've got a Galactus deck, and I've got something that could potentially hide a Galactus deck. I've got a number of 4-cost cards, which I'll cover in a second. So Zabu's in here. Forge, who I've sort of fallen in love with Galactus, because when you combine him with Wong, who's a 4-cost card, which gets the benefit of Zabu, it helps build up some additional points for that Galactus to guarantee the explosion of the other 2 lanes. So I really like the Forge here. Electro, I mentioned, it is one of the cards that you need just to sort of ramp a little bit. Same thing with Wave. You want to maybe wave on 4, or rather 3 or 4, and then you get your Galactus down, and then potentially Alioth the turn after that. Then I've also got Shuri in here, because I'm going to give myself another line to potentially win if I want to have a Nimrod in a different lane. So maybe I Shuri a spot, I Nimrod a spot, that same Shuri spot, and then a Galactus where I might potentially win. And then I could get my 12 Nimrods over to the Galactus lane, which would be perfect. I mentioned Wong earlier. Again, you can use him. I mean, depending if someone else magics, you could use him along with Shuri, but he's really there more for combining with Forge into the Galactus. You could always Forge into your Absorbing Man and then Absorbing Man into your Galactus as well. Not that it matters necessarily. You can also Forge your Absorbing Man into your Nimrod if you do not get Shuri. All decent plays, I think. We already mentioned Nimrod just being destroyed and getting into that Galactus lane. I've currently dropped Null in here for the time being. Death is another option in this realm. For the potential you don't get Alioth or something and you need a strong card to lay down some power on that Galactus lane, if you bring Galactus early, and you want Null on that final turn. Galactus, we've mentioned. Alioth is the showcase here, right? He's just there to destroy whatever your opponent plays. So unless your opponent has priority and they've either got armor and or Cosmo, that's the only way you're going to lose this. Because more than likely, if you've Galactus, you're probably sitting in good situation, because it's unlikely that somebody played a card on this lane that was more than Galactus after Galactus went off. Now, it's possible, but if that's the case, then Alioth is really going to help lock in this lane. So I really like that combination a lot. And then America Chavez on turn 6 just to get more consistency. I really want to lean into the ramping into Galactus, the waving into Galactus to get him down on 5 and then Alioth on 6. That's 100% what I want to do, because it feels way better to do anything like that. Now, it's also nice, for some reason, if you Galactus, say, on 4 and then Shuri on 5, you could Alioth on 6, and now Alioth is 10 and destroying whatever else is there, so it could help, depending what's going on. So I like this deck a lot, even though I'm not a huge Galactus player. Jay, who's out there who loves Galactus, I would love to hear from you in the comments below what you think about this or what Galactus deck you're going to form if you go ahead and get Alioth. I always like to talk about alternates with these type of decks. When I was looking at this, maybe you take out Nimrod and Shuri, and you maybe go with a X-23 Wolverine type route. Maybe a Carnage in there in case you want to X-23 Wolverine and Carnage or Electro in the same lane, and then you Carnage that lane, and then but you get a little risky there, because then if X-23 goes to a spot and Wolverine goes to a spot, now you're not doing anything with Galactus. That's why I didn't have them in here up front, but it is a possibility if you want to add some RNG to your life. And the truth is anything that really goes with Galactus, you could sort of mesh in here. It's up to you. It's a Galactus deck. You want Alioth in there for that turn 6 play. You want Galactus before it. Whatever else you put in here, I mean, the options are endless within that Galactus realm. So I wanted to try an Alioth lockdown concept. And the idea here is, well, if I've already got one lane locked down, all I need to do is lock down another lane. Now, typically you're talking about Professor X and Storm in those type of situations, which we've got here. The other cards we've got Sunspot and Nebula is your early cheap cost cards, because those are going to be put in your lanes where you want to play your Storm and or your Professor X. So that way, when you're potentially not playing on our turns or your opponent can't play there, you are building them up. I've added armor in this as well, because if you can play Sunspot or Nebula on 1 and then armor in that location 2 to protect them from a late Killmonger, say it's a Storm lane, you feel more comfortable doing that, where it's Sunspot on 1, maybe armor on 2, Storm on 3, you could Jugs on 4, and then you could potentially Professor X a lane 5, and you could even then Alioth the other lane on turn 6 in case things don't go your way. So I wanted to give myself some options there to do this. Now, I've also brought Wave into this to potentially maybe bring a Professor X in early, to maybe bring in a Doom early, or maybe even bring in a Alioth early if you really wanted to. I mean, maybe you Storm on 3. Wave is a card that I think we could potentially take out of this, but right now I wanted to leave it in case I wanted to play with that Doom Alioth combination a little bit, because it would feel bad to have Doom Alioth in your hand before turn 6 and then get America Chavez and really not have a lot to do there and only play one. But it's not the end of the world. It just means that you might not have been able to play some of your early cost cards on curve. So we talked about armor protecting the wands. We've got Jeff for the general flexibility to get into that Professor X lane for potentially getting into the Storm lane. We already talked about Wave and Juggernaut. I think Wave's probably, I don't want to call her the weakest card in here, but she's probably the weakest card in there, because unless you want to get one of these 3 early, I'm not sure there's a point of her. Absorbing Man I've got in here for either storming a lane again if you really want to, or you could Juggernaut another lane if you really want to, or you could Doom a lane if you really want to. So you could Wave into Doom on 4, you could Absorbing Man on 5, you could Alioth on 6. So there's some options within here that you can go different routes, and that's why I've got him in here. We already talked about Professor X, Doom, Alioth, and America Chavez to thin out. So I want to try this a little bit. I did think about a high Evo Cyclops type situation. I'm not fully convinced that you're going to skip enough turns or have leftover energy to make that work. So I wasn't ready to try to experiment with that. I could see the potential for it, but I don't think I'm going to do anything with that as far as this lockdown goes. The alternates out, maybe you take out Armor or Jeff in case you don't have a good replacement for Jeff is always Nightcrawler. Not an equivalent replacement, but it's an option. I would maybe think about bringing in cards. I don't know if I love this, but Sandman to potentially limit your opponent. That way, you know, if you're playing Doom or you already played Doom and you want to play Absorbing Man after that, you've got a lot of Dooms on the board, which feels really good. Though I'm not really sure I love that one as much, to be honest with you, but it is an option if you want to start playing with it. And again, I mentioned the high Evo lockdown type concept, but I'm just not sure you can mesh those well enough with what I'm trying to do here. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below and whether you think you get something like this to work or not. Okay, last but not least, I had to try to do something with Loki. I had to, because Loki is all the hotness right now. And frankly, if you're not playing Loki, you're probably just having a frustrating time. And even if you are playing Loki, you're probably having a frustrating time because it's just about mirroring each other and who gets what first. Now, having said that, I really like Loki, and I saw the KM Best Jeff video, which I thought was done pretty well. And I think generally speaking, everybody should just chill. I think that whether this is frustrating or not, and I mean that in a respectful manner, if you're frustrated, step away. Jeff said it. If you're not having fun, just step away. It's not a big deal. It's a game. If you're not having fun, step away. If you want to keep playing the game and have fun, then just have fun, because like they mentioned, and I mentioned this previously, Mobius is coming. And I think KM said it. He's going to prune this timeline. Loki's being mischievous. That's what he does. Mobius is going to come and tame everything down. Nothing's going to change in OTA. If I was second dinner, I wouldn't change anything before Mobius. I'm like, look, this is going to be what it's going to be. We'll see what happens with Mobius. Then we will analyze how things are going. If we need to change Loki after that, we'll analyze. Does 3-4 make sense like Jeff mentioned? I think it could. I think 3-4 is a more than reasonable change. Could they change it before that already? Yeah, but I think after that, then I could see them bumping it back up, because I think Mobius is going to be such a huge counter to it that people are going to go, all right, I don't care about Loki anymore. It doesn't do anything for me. So having said that, what do we have here in the deck? Well, I've been playing a deck that I've really liked. I got from Arya. Shout out to you again. I really like the Quinjet, which is a necessity. Agent 13 is just a good cheap card. Get another card into your deck. I've got Zabu in this one because I do have several 4s here in White Queen, Absorbing Man, Moongirl, Nick Fury, which we'll get to in a second. Collector's a necessity, obviously. Mirage, which is just a great card to have anytime you're trying to acquire other cards. Getting one of your opponent's cards for more power is great, or whether you need another card for Loki to help build up Collector. Agent Coulson's a great card, again, to do the same similar type of things as far as getting cards into your hand. Loki is Loki. Loki's going to give your Collector a bunch of points, give you the ability to play cards cheaper than you would have originally. And typically what I'm finding with Loki is that anytime you pair him up with Quinjet, you don't necessarily need to pair him up with Sarah as well, because the cards are already so cheap and you've already got so many limited spots to play on the board that you can't play all the cards anyway. So I think without Sarah, and that's one of the cards I dropped from this, I think with Quinjet and Loki, it works out fine as is. White Queen is just a fantastic cost to power ratio, and with Zabu, it gets a little cheaper. You also get some information on your opponent. Absorbing Man works great with almost anything in this. You've got Loki, White Queen, Mirage, Agent Coulson, Moongirl, Nick Fury, Alioth. It all makes sense. Now, Alioth, you're not going to be able to do it with unless somebody else magics for you, or unless Agent 13 or something like that, or Agent Coulson. But more than likely, it's, you know, not going to happen. Moongirl is here to potentially double your Alioth. Okay, so that is what we're looking at here. Double your Alioth with a Quinjet, Alioth on 5, Alioth on 6. That could be a lot of fun. So that means you might need to Loki earlier. So you Quinjet, you Collector, you Loki, you Moongirl, you Alioth, you Alioth. That feels darn good. And I'm probably not Aliothing that lane with the Collector, but I want to play and see how that works, because having the ability to get 2 Alioths on the board could be really, really fun. And honestly, you've got the Loki gameplay with the Nick Fury, Moongirl, Agent 13, Agent Coulson, in case you're not getting the Moongirl double up. And Moongirl is a great option just for the Collector anyway. So I really like what's happening here. This is probably the deck that I'm going to start with. I think given everything that's happening with Loki, this has the most likelihood of the decks I looked over for success, but I also really want to try that Galactus one too. Whenever you do play the Alioth in this deck though, you do want to be careful which lane you pick, because you put it all wrong on 5 and then again wrong on 6. It's like, oh, well, Glad I picked 2 Alioths. That didn't do anything for me. It is sort of critical to make sure to pick those lanes right, so I would see that being a little problematic. Alternates out. You could get rid of Zabu and maybe White Queen. You could bring in AC, Cable, maybe Devil Dino. Anytime you've got Moongirl, you're obviously looking at Devil Dino. I think that could be a reasonable thing to do and potentially get down on 5. Maybe you don't get Alioth and you want to get Devil Dino on 5 and the second Devil Dino on 6. That could all work. I did not put America Chavez in here. I suppose you could try to put her in here to thin things out a little bit and try to get more consistent. I don't know. I really wanted to take the chance here to get the cards that I wanted and continue to draw, and playing with Loki could be, like I said, pretty fun. Now, remember, when I did, you know, Quinn, Collector, Loki, Moongirl, the only way that works is if you draw Moongirl on 4. I want you to understand that, right? So if you don't understand that, you're not... Unless somebody plays a mirror, you're not getting that Moongirl, which means you're not getting that Alioth. So you've really got to sort of think about which lane you're going to go to there, because one can screw over the other. That is critical to know in this. Now, does that mean we might want to pick one lane or the other? Maybe. But like I said, I really want to try a deck with Loki and Alioth because Loki's a lot of fun right now. And I want to try to play both cards at the same time. All right, so I wanted to talk about what I thought is probably the biggest key with Alioth, and I really sort of mentioned it a little bit earlier, and it's probably obvious to most of you, but in case it's not, you want to keep priority. You need to be winning 2 lanes when you play Alioth, so that way he's essentially not going to get countered. As long as you pick the right lane that you need to win, there's no way your opponent beats you in that lane, assuming you were only down by less than 5 points. That way you win it. But if you don't and they have prio, you risk the Cosmo and armor situation. And then the last thing, like I mentioned before, you wave into Alioth on 5 and absorbing man in 6. That could be a lot of fun too. So what are you thinking about Alioth? Are you going to come in and get him on day 1 as far as the spotlights go? Are you going to play him in any of these decks? What decks are you thinking about putting him in? Please comment on that in the YouTube comments below. If you want to come over to the Discord and comment there, that's linked in the description below. I appreciate you making it this far. If you want to further support the channel, considering hammering down that like button, sharing with your aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews. And until next time, we hope you have a wonderful day.